Welcome everyone to the Asia Clean Energy Forum. My name is Jessica Jones-Langley. I'm from the Run 21 team, and this is our official side event at this fantastic event in Asia. And as you can probably tell from my accent, I am from the Asia Pacific region. I'm from New Zealand, but we're calling in today from Paris. I met with a few colleagues around the world, so thank you everyone for being here. And the reason why we're here is because we just this week launched a very exciting report, the Renewables 2022 Global Status Report. So we're very excited to share the findings with you and also have a discussion about what that means for the world, but more specifically for the Asia Pacific region. So I'd like to introduce my colleague, who is the woman behind the report. She's done a lot of work in bringing this together. She has a lot of expertise in investment and policy, and she is a fundamental driver of bringing this report forward. So it's a perfect person to discuss the findings with us today. So I'd like to bring on stage my colleague, Natalie Ladonis.
Hello, everybody. Hi, it's a pleasure to be here with you. It's an honor to be presenting the results of the Global Status Report 2022 in this side event of ASAP. It's a very important event for us because we have been doing this already for quite a few years. And this is an important way of showing also our involvement with the Asian community, the Asia community. Thank you.
Fantastic. So what I'll do next is I'll give you the floor and let you present the amazing findings that we'll be discussing in just a while with our beautiful panel.
Sure. Sharing my screen. Are you having the view? Are you?
Fantastic.
Okay?
It looks
great.
Perfect.
Great. Well, let's talk about the official presentation of the results of the Global Status Report 2022. So I think I'm gonna perhaps keep quickly this part. I think you know Run 21. We're a global community, a network of networks, and we bring together, of course, science, academia, NGOs, industry, and governments. So it's a crowdsourced report, and yeah, this is our DNA, if I could say. The Global Status Report, it hasn't changed, I would say, since a while. We have been publishing this report. It's a 17th edition, and the report is structured, as you might already know, into multiple chapters. This year we have made some changes. Market and industry chapter, it's a bit reduced in terms of size because it has always been a very long chapter. This year we have made the choice to reduce the amount, even the information is more condensed. And we also have added the renewables in cities. As you might know, we have also published in past years, the Renewables in Cities report, and this year, as it's an intermediate year, we have decided to track a bit the new developments in cities. So this is the last chapter of our report this year. So let's dive in what happened in 2021. It was certainly called, or everybody thought it was a promise. We were promised for a green recovery. What we have seen is that there was an ambition change. There was a hard push of net zero commitments across the world. As you can see here in the map, in the world map, we had almost 136 countries that are pushing for a net zero target. So this is great. We have ambition, and there are identifications. We have KPIs saying that, at least today. We also had a very nice year in terms of renewable power. We had record growth in additions of solar PV and wind specifically. We have reached almost 315 gigawatts, and it was, of course, mainly pushed by solar PV and wind, as I said before. If we compare that to what it's expected to be achieved by 2030, we are quite far away still. So, well, we have to triple, basically, the capacities added just to reach the amount of renewable power that we will require to reach a net zero scenario or an average scenario. We could compare it also to the WITO, the World Energy Outlook from IRENA. So there's still a lot to do. Well, we have seen that there's a constant increase of capacity addition, but we're still far away from this. So let's take a look of a reality check of the energy system. Where are we standing right now? If we take the view, if we observe the whole energy spectrum or the whole energy mix, we can say today that fossil fuels have remained almost the same for the past more than a decade. Even 2019, if we go back to 2009, we have always say around 80% of the total energy that we consume. So this means not only power, but also transport and heating and cooling, around 80%. What we have seen, it's a little inflection, I would say, in energy demand because of COVID. This is not a surprise. So in 2020, we saw a higher share of renewables in this mix, but this is only due. It's a how would say an intermediate phase because it's only related to the energy demand decrease. So we're around 12% share of renewables in our total energy mix today. Of course, we need to take into account, it's important to push energy efficiency, energy savings, and of course, renewable energy. Let's take a little bit of a zoom and look at what happens outside the power, because what I showed at the very beginning is what the power we were having records, growth and a capacity added, but let's take a look at what happened in other sectors. I mentioned in the past, transport and heating and cooling, and the two together consume 80% of all the energy that we use at the scale of the worldwide. We have seen in the graph we have below, we have seen an increase, but it's a slight increase. We have seen that in 5 years' time, there was barely change. Some accelerations at some point. We can see that in transport in the latest years, but nonetheless, yeah, heating and cooling and transport still need to be transformed to use renewables. So we also, this year, we decided to try to take a look at the globe and see. We haven't done that for every country, but at least we try to follow the largest energy consuming countries in the world. And we try to take a snapshot and see how it's the energy share in the total final energy consumption. So this is a graph that we made based on our research and data that was available. And we only noticed that 3 countries of 80 that we studied this year, for example, have more than 50% renewables in their total final energy consumption. So that gives us already a good idea of how much work it's still needed to be done across the globe. And it's very different depending on the regions we are. So this is quite a sad picture, I would say, of where are we standing right now in terms of renewables across the whole economy. So transport sector, energy, power, and of course, heating and cooling. So there's still a lot to do, and we need to really push that growth. So I mentioned at the very beginning that we had a lot of ambition in 2021, and this was translated into net zero policies. But if we zoom a bit more, these 135 countries, if you take a look in the details, you realize actually that only 84 of these countries have a net zero target and an economy-wide renewable energy target. So this is less than half, a bit more than half, I'm sorry. And then if we go a bit deeper, only 36% countries have 100% economy-wide renewable energy target. So the translation into the real action, well, it's not as positive as we would hope so. So this is, I would say, is this a collapse of the fossil fuel system? Because what we have been seeing this year, especially with the energy security issues and the energy crisis that we started in 2021, well, we are wondering if this is this the time to really make a shift. We know already that the climate, we have huge climate and environmental impacts, of course, health impacts. This is not new. We have today a huge economic impact. We see it with the price hikes and the volatility of prices. And of course, the energy security. In any case, Europe these days have really put forward this energy security issue following the crisis. So fossil fuels are continuing to be subsidized at a high rate. if we compare with what it's spent in renewables, there's a huge gap. And this is perhaps something that needs to be changed to make the transition happen. So are we starting then a new energy era? So as we know, there's a lot of benefits of transitioning from this energy fossil fuel-based system to a renewable one. As we have said in the past, clean air and health quality, healthy environment. There's a limitation of CO2 emissions. So climate change mitigation and adaptation. We can also alleviate poverty and improve energy access to facilitate access to those that are not connected, for example, to the grid or so. There's also a reduction of costs and expenses, and this makes more sense today with the prices variabilities of fossil fuels. It's for sure a possibility of economic development, creating local value chains and social development as well. As I mentioned, a stable and secure supply, not only in terms of cost, but also in terms of availability of the supply. And creation of values, local values in industrialization and innovation. And as I said before, energy security and sovereignty. So what we have seen in the past decade, it's that renewable energy makes the most sense in terms of cost. Today, it's way competitive compared to fossil fuel cost in terms of operations. You can see here that the drop has been impressive for solar in particular, and today it makes complete economical sense to develop solar PV or even wind power plants in specific locations based on fossil fuel prices that we see. And this is only the picture in 2021. I wonder how would be the picture in 2022 now that we had an increase in the price or pressure in this type of commodities. We have seen, I talked about previously about governments that had struggled to translate this ambition into action. Nonetheless, we have some actors in the society that are moving forward, and this is also good news. It's important to promote this type of change. And for example, we see corporations that had a huge implication and involvement in the growth of PPAs in the past year. So as you can see, there has been quite an exponential, I would say, increase. And last year, not only last year, there was more than 31 gigawatts of additional PPAs signed by corporations. So this is an important growth, like 24%. And this is one of the other actors that could help make the transition happen. As we know already, cities, we have tracked that in the past with our REC report, our renewables in cities, but cities are essential to push this because they bring the targets into the real life for everybody. So we have seen that there's a lot of cities that have identified targets, and more than 900 cities have targets and policies together, and 1,500 have only renewable energy target policies. So this is great. We have seen an increase. Without any surprise, power is the one that is the most common policy here. As we can see, this is a generic, structural problem that we have at every level. Power is the one that has been developed the most, and transport and heating, as you can see, are smaller in terms of participation. So we have the choice. Yes, I hope we have a choice still. We need to select where we put our money, basically. Today, if you take a look, this is a partial look, I would say, but we can see that around 366 billion of US dollar were invested in renewables and fuels, but we're far below what it's really needed. So if you can, we have done this comparison with some data of our colleagues from Bloomberg and CDP. And for example, we have to multiply by 2 or 5 times the amount we're spending today to reach one of those scenarios. And those scenarios, if I compare with the yellow line at the top, 1,008 trillions, this is only considering solar PV and wind power. So if we take a picture of the whole energy system, this is way more that we need. The other scenarios are more wide in terms of power, but we are not taking into account what is needed for transport and heating and cooling. So yes, we need to use the money in the correct holder, I would say. So instead of spending this amounts in fossil fuel, it will be better to move it to renewables. And this is it for me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Natalie. So I'll jump right in there and ask you a quick few questions. So I know, Natalie, that you've been working so much on this report. You've been diving really deep into the numbers for quite a few months now. Can you tell us a bit more about the trends that you're seeing in terms of who the people or who the organizations or the governments are who are innovating policy to bring renewables into the building sector, which, as we know, is a huge consumer of energy?
In terms of stakeholders, what we have seen is corporations are being very active in trying to move the needle, but not only. I think that at the city scales as well, it's part of what I just presented. Those are the ones that are pushing the most. Yeah, I would say that this governments are also, it depends on in the regions, but we have seen also government push in terms of policy measures. And well, I hope this is going to get spread across the globe and not limited to certain countries.
And any specific technologies that you're seeing in those policies?
I've seen, well, at least I remember very clearly, because the report is very long, so I don't have every detail, but from what I recall, heat pumps have had a huge increase this year specifically. I know in Europe that we have a nice graph of some G20 countries, so there's more than Europe here, if I recall correctly, and there has been a huge spike of heat pumps, for example. And this is also promising. It's a way of moving away from fossil fuels and electrifying with renewables.
Absolutely. And as you know, at REN21, we are a member organization from all different stakeholders. So could you tell us how well our collaboration is going in terms of actually putting renewable energy targets into place?
I would say it depends at which level. at which level. So we have some country level policies that are quite spread. Then if you go granular, as we saw with the cities, not only 930 cities. I'm not sure how many cities do we have in the world. I mean, this is a drop in the ocean, I would say. So yes, there are, and things are moving, but this is far from being enough.
Exactly. So we're seeing a little bit of momentum, but definitely more momentum is needed. So thank you so much, Natalie, for your amazing presentation and following up with a few questions. I'd like now to present our esteemed guests. So we have some amazing people with us today who will be chipping in and also giving their feedback onto the findings and giving their ideas and also what they're seeing in their respective fields. So I'd like to invite to the stage Randy Christensen. She is an Economic Affairs Officer with the Energy Division, the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. Thank you so much for joining us, Randy. So I'll hand the floor over to you if you could give us your feedback and your ideas and opinions.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And first of all, I want to say congratulations on a very, very impressive report with a very broad set of findings. As you mentioned, I am with ESCAT, which is the Asia Pacific Commission of the UN. So I'm very focused. And when you showed the maps, my eye, right away turns to the Asia Pacific, and it really doesn't look good, unfortunately. So yes, if you have 2020 numbers, things looked a little bit better because there was a huge drop in demand, but that also kind of reflects some of the economic worries that we're in this part of the world, because this part of the world is heavily reliant on manufacturing. It's also heavily reliant on tourism, and as that has gone down, obviously the economy's demand has gone down. So it's not a renewable success story, unfortunately. And now we're seeing travel restrictions ease, so we're seeing tourists coming back. We're seeing general restrictions ease, which means also production and demand is going up. And that is, that's great for the economic development of these countries. But the fact of the matter is that these countries are heavily reliant on fossil fuels. For example, in 2020, which is the year where, it could look artificially good, 80% of power generated in Southeast Asia was from fossil fuels. That's a lot. And we do see that the countries have great renewable targets. For example, ASEAN has, as a general regional target, that they want 23% of renewables in final energy consumption by 2025. But to be really honest, we're really far from that. And there needs to be a massive change in order for those targets to be met, let alone the 2030 SDGs and the longer term net zero emissions targets. And if we're looking in this region, generally, what I will say is the net zero emissions targets are more 2060 than 2050, which we're seeing in the European and American context. So there's no doubt investments needs to scale up in this part of the world. And this part of the world, unfortunately, as I mentioned, due to economic reasons, is quite capacity or capital constrained. Investments need to scale up, not just in renewables, but also one of the major facilitator of renewables, which is grids. It simply needs to scale up. And one thing I would like to talk about as kind of a propeller or an enabler of renewables is flexibility. Flexibility is going to be key to the changing power systems and energy systems that we're seeing. But unfortunately, I think there's a little bit of an over kind of emphasis on technical flexibility. We're seeing all these studies coming out from amazing organizations like ARENA, IEA, World Bank, what have you not, saying, yeah, these countries, we can implement like massive amounts of renewables, just go. But why is the investment not happening then? If it's possible, it's cheaper, why is it not happening? And I think one of the things I really want to emphasize is contractual flexibility. What we're seeing in this part of the world is that there's a lot of reliance on really long-term fixed physical PPAs, which means that fossil generators are already locked in for years and years to come in their revenues with a production. So, if you're a utility, why would I want renewables in when I already paid for my fossil fuels power generation? And you also need to recognize that a lot of the utilities in this region are in, quite precarious financial situations. So they don't just have money to spend to kind of just say, I already bought that power, but that doesn't matter. I want some different greener power. It is really a matter of economics here. So I think what really needs to happen is there needs to be more of a conversation around these stranded assets and how to get the power systems out of these stranded assets in a reasonable way, both for the governments, but also for the investors, because we can't have a situation where, contracts are just broken because now we want renewables, because that will make the energy transitions more expensive. Because investor trust will just go down, and that's not what we want. I like the figure you had on the cost decreases on renewable energy, but also if you look at what the LCOE of renewable energy is in certain parts of Asia, it's actually not that low. And again, why is that? It's not because the technology is more expensive necessarily. There's a lot of enabling environments that make investors require higher returns on their investments in these parts of the world that really need to be tackled. And this is tackled by more transparent PPAs, by more transparent auctioning processes, by making sure there's a level playing field between incumbent utilities and private investors, these types of things. So it's also easy to say, for me to say as an economist, not an engineer, that this is not just an engineering challenge, but it really is a challenge where all the disciplines have to work together. And also to the question, what's 2022 going to be looking like? Well, you could hope that renewables costs keep continuing down, but we also have the issue of critical minerals. Supply chains are being disrupted. Does that mean that we're seeing a break in this curve? Like it's yet to see, and this the world is just a very uncertain place right now, geopolitically, where prices are going to develop, and it feels like we're very much at a tipping point, and it feels like we can't shout loud enough for governments to keep their eye on the ball when it comes to renewables, because it is important. It's our future. So I think reports like these, they're so important to just see where are we, and what needs to be done. So yeah, I think that was my quick-ish comment, but I'm happy to keep discussing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Randy, and we will definitely keep discussing shortly. We'll find out a little bit more from our speakers, and we'll come straight back to you in a short while. So thank you again to Randy Christensen. So next up, we have another esteemed speaker, Neeraj Kuldeep, which he is a program lead from the Council on Energy, Environment and Water. So welcome you up to the stage. Welcome, Neeraj. I'll hand over to you if you could please give us your feedback and also what you're seeing in the region as well.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica, for having me here and this opportunity. And I completely agree with Randy on many of those points. However, I would like to allude to the India journey, which is, in many ways different from many of the other countries that we see in the region. And I also understand that the challenges that Randy highlighted, India also faced those challenges and continue to face some of those. But we have overcome those challenges over the years by creating a massive renewable energy market within a very short time span of about 5 to 7 years. If I talk about the scale, 2021 particularly was very special for India on many fronts. It was the year when India, for the first time, crossed 100 gigawatt mark. The total installed capacity of renewables, which is, excluding the large hydro, is about 115 gigawatt right now. And we also have a very strong pipeline of about 60 gigawatt. So this 60 gigawatt capacity will come up on board in next 1 to 2 years, and it's at various stages of either they are under construction or they are at quite advanced stages of being rolled out. So it gives us the kind of a scale which also has now helped India become the second largest RE market in the Asia region, and fourth overall. Now, in last year, instead of 5th place, we crossed Germany, and we are the 4th largest RE market. And seems like India is going to very soon become the 3rd largest market, and our mission towards 2030, where our Honorable Prime Minister announced to reach 500 gigawatt capacity by 2020. Sorry, I'm closing there. By 2030. Which is again quite significant. India is currently deploying about 15 gigawatt odd capacity every year. But to reach the 2030 target, we will have to increase it by 3 times. So that's a massive jump, and the time frame that we have is very short. And that's where all the recommendations that Randy made are very pertinent. We need to have more flexibility. Flexibility not on the conventional side, but also on the renewable side. If we talk about various geographies and states in India, many of these states are already have achieved 60 to 70% of renewable energy share in their generation. So they are very stressed and they won't be able to accommodate more renewables. So To have that, we need to have this flexibility built in the system, but also from the renewable side. And taking this cue from the over the years, India is actively now focusing on bringing a lot of flexibility in the system. They are targeting hybrid deployments where solar and wind can be combined together. In India, both these technologies are complementary. Solar generates power during the daytime, but wind starts picking up in the evening and during the night hours when solar is at its minimum. That's happening. We are also doing pilots and deployments along with storage. A couple of months ago only, one of the largest developer in India is setting up a 10 gigawatt hour pumped storage facility, which will be commissioned in another 2 to 3 years. So many of these developments are taking place to bring more flexibility. And secondly, again, building on what Randy mentioned, the electricity utilities, they have been the key off-taker and drivers so far for the renewable energy. However, because of the impact of COVID and their poor financial health, they are, the demand from the utilities is drying up. And that's very visible also in India. So we need to create more or new demand centers. And India is already taking a lot of regulatory and policy initiatives to create demand and bring in consumers directly into the energy transition. So they are announcing various market mechanisms where consumers can demand green power from their electricity utilities, or they can procure it directly from the electricity markets. There are also initiatives where consumers are now allowed to install behind the meter and have more share of renewable energy in their portfolio. So that's the second bit. Thirdly, again, on the similar lines, there is huge demand in some of the underserved consumer categories. If we talk about, let's say, agricultural consumers or residential consumers, these consumers, they receive highly subsidized electricity in India. And solar, despite tariff being one of the lowest in the world, is not affordable for these consumers. So then there are these various financial incentive mechanisms and schemes that Government of India bringing to also facilitate deployment in these categories. Despite all these initiatives and significant movement that has taken place over last 1 decade, the share of renewable energy in the electricity still remains quite low. It's around 10-11% in the overall electricity that India consumes. So there is still a lot to be done, and it would require a lot of initiatives to bring that flexibility, to bring that additional investment that is needed to create increased annual deployment, and it will require demand creation from right and left and top and down from all the centers and all the consumers. So I'll take a pause there, and of course, there are other things, but I'll probably cover some of those things during the Q&A session or in the panel round. Yeah, over to you, Jessica.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your intervention there, Neeraj. We really appreciate it. So we have one final more esteemed guest with us. So I'd like to bring on Mika Obayashia she's a director from the Renewable Energy Institute. She's joining us from Japan. I'd like to hand over the floor to you as well to add your ideas and opinions.
Okay, thank you very much, Jessica. First, I would like to congratulate this remarkable flagship report of REN 21, it always shows us our standpoint of energy and direct us that the way forward that we have to go. So in the REN 21 annual report, it was reported that in 2021, the world had once slowed the expansion of renewables. But however, I think that Asia remains the global center of renewables expansion, and then try to expand more. And the direction Asia is heading is in the right place. For the 9th consecutive year, Asia dominated all over regions in new solar power PV installations, accounting for 52% of global capacity added in 2021. Asia is also home to a large concentration of solar sharing agrivoltaic power plants. For the 13th consecutive year, Asia, mainly China, was the largest regional market, accounting for about 61% of added wind power capacity. Asia accounted for about 48% of global offshore generation capacity as well. The current energy crisis is an energy price crisis, is a crisis brought by fossil fuels, swelling fossil fuel prices. The invention war by Russia, which has provided countries with fossil fuels, uranium, those conventional energy sources, has made the people clearly realize the nature of today's energy crisis. Some countries' energy policy so far has been one of continuing fossil fuel security, but now with a steady decline in cost and expansion of renewables, I think that the world is moving towards security of the renewable age. The energy transition needs to be accelerated further to ensure this renewable security. But still, that Asia has this kind of challenges. For example, it seems that Japan is still obsessed to fossil fuel age security, tries to get more and more fossil fuel, more dependent on fossil fuel. This mantra that we are very energy poor country, we are energy resource poor, has to be cleared out and then see the reality of renewable energy rich in the country. As Randy has already pointed out, some countries in Asia are rather calmer to market reform, so there are still immature power markets and some untransparent systems remain. But there is also the influence of large incumbent utilities and the market monopolies. So, and then also the flexibility is insufficient in the grid system. These artificial barriers need to be removed to speed up the introduction of renewables, which resulted lower cost, create more market certainty, and attract more investment to the region. And then this is the way that the Asian countries that has to move. Thank you very much. And then I would like to pass it to Jessica.
Thank you so much, Mika. So I'll keep you on the stage and then I'll invite all of our speakers up from today. So Randy Christensen, Neeraj Kaldeep, and also Natalie Ledoinois, so to join the stage. And we'll have quick questions and answers from the panel. So my first question, also I can see some chat and activity, which is always fantastic. So Randy, I'll start with you. You talked about, economics and the stranded assets. Could you comment potentially on the political will to really for the uptake of renewable energy, and kind of your thoughts on why we aren't moving faster than we are today?
Yes, thank you very much for the question, Jessica. I think we're seeing more and more political will towards giving renewables a priority in economic plans. I think when we're talking about renewables, I think more and more governments are understanding that green economy is good economy. A lot more pressure from corporations to make power systems and energy systems green is a really, really good thing, because it pressures some of the governments who have been slightly sluggish to think about, like, their manufacturing sectors might move elsewhere if they don't start to push some renewables. So I think in that sense, political will can really be pushed by the private sector, especially the manufacturing sector. But I do also think that there is some some issues with, for example, incumbent utilities. And I actually, before I joined the UN, way before, I was actually with the Danish transmission system operator. And I do understand the dilemma that these utilities are in, because their primary task is to keep the lights on. And if you lack capacity in understanding how to operate a system with higher shares of renewables, then you are going to be conservative. And I think this is here political will really comes in. The politicians need to be brave enough to go in and say to their utilities, listen, guys, you need to figure this out. Other places have figured it out, so can you. That being said, that also means that a lot of international support needs to come in, and there needs to be a willingness, I think, from international donors to finance some of the things that are less sexy. As in grid build out, for example, strengthening the grid is key to actually renewables uptake, and for these utilities to feel like they have a secure energy system, because it is, like, they are going to take a hit if blackouts start rolling. And we also see some of the discourse that comes from some players in the energy systems when blackouts happen. Oh, that's renewables' fault, but actually, no, it's not necessarily. So there needs to be this collaboration and education about what a secure, modern, affordable, and renewable power system, energy system looks like. And then there needs to be some bravery. There needs to be some bravery saying, yeah, okay, for example, from some of the donor countries saying, okay, this country may have put themselves in a bind with a lot of physical PPAs for assets. If we want to be serious about saving the world, then maybe we need to provide some funding to buy them out of these assets. It's not sexy, but it's needed, and it will be needed to have more renewables uptake. And then a last thing I think there needs political will about, and that is unfortunately to some extent decreasing right now due to geopolitics, is the ambition to tie power systems together, connectivity, cross-border connectivity. Because when you increase balancing areas, renewables get a lot easier and more affordable to manage. But some countries naturally don't have big balancing areas. And if you take India, you have states that could connect with other states. These types of cross-border, even if they're within nations, they need to be optimized and they need to be invested in. And there needs to be some real political will to push forward cross-jurisdictional institutions to support this type of work. I think that was my answer to that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your answer there, Randy. And I can see quite a few people nodding, including Mika. I saw you nodding quite a lot. Did you have anything to add to what Randy said around the political will?
I might jump quickly in.
Oh, yeah,
just a brief comment on that. And you just mentioned at the very beginning the stranded assets, and this is of course a huge problem even for countries that are fossil fuel exporters today. This is for sure hindering this transition, because there's a loss in how do you say that, capital coming into the country if they move away from those fossil fuels. So this is like a lobbying frame, I don't know how you say, yeah, that it's blocking the movement. So this is something that we have also taken into account. Governments are not always willing to destroy their internal economy, and this is completely logical. So this is where external help it's needed to build in and how to get out of this system. What we have seen last year, for example, I remember, if I recall correctly, there was a partnership agreement signed within Europe and South Africa to move away from coal. I hope this is the first one of many others, because from what I recall, at least today, is that there was the only one signed, but hopefully there will be others being signed in Southeast Asia as well, to move away from this coal dependence and transition. So with the help and bringing money from external partners.
Fantastic. Thank you for jumping in there. And I see we have Mika back in the call, which is fantastic. So we'll bring her up to the stage soon. But I want to, ask you the same question as well, Niraj.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. So very quickly from, perspective of developing nations, especially because in this region, many of the countries are, under the developing nation basket. If we talk about India, the economy is, one of the fastest growing economy in the world, which then in turns put a lot of pressure on the energy infrastructure and the energy system to ensure reliable and quality supply to the industries, to its people as well. To meet this kind of increasing demand, of course, India will have to build a lot of new renewable energy capacity. There are some estimates which are suggesting that even with 500 gigawatt target that India has for 2030, it might require additional coal capacity to continue to meet to meet the growing demand. However, having said that, of course, this indicates two things. One, the push for renewables needs to be much higher, and we need to, have a lot more focus towards renewable energy. And two, this again does not, say that there's no political will among these countries. Of course, it's less because there are these, inherent biases that they have. Some of these biases are from the development perspective, and some of these biases are also from a non-development point of view. But for example, India recently, the Ministry of Power identified 80 plus thermal units and made a promise that about 80 billion units will be replaced with renewable energy. So they will, bring down the generation from these 80 plus thermal units and operate these power plants at their lowest technical minimum and replace that energy with renewables. So it will, further add another around 30 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity. So, just wanted to bring in some of these perspectives as well. I completely understand that we need a much stronger political will for the, the call for climate action. But
fantastic. Thank you for adding that in there as well. So I just want to throw the floor back to Mika. So you're nodding before if you wanted to add anything into what Randy and Niraj was talking about.
Actually, that I just cannot, listen that what Nala said, but my comment to Randy is like that. Of course, that the political will is quite needed, but if the market reaches a certain level, like a kind of over political intervention will make the market really complicated. That is happening in Japan now. So I think that the market should be very simple, transparent. All the stakeholders in the market has to understand all the kind of rules clearly at once. And then all the information has to be provided to the same level to the all market players. So there's no kind of a distinguish that the big incumbent utility has this information, a smaller company has this portion. It's not work well in the market, that we need a kind of all level of transparent market. And then that is a standpoint of the market without any political kind of intervention in the market. And then what Randy mentioned about the interconnectors in the region, I think that is quite important point of view, especially for Asian region. For example, that our institute is proposing for the Asia supergrid for years, but actually that this idea is not new in Asia. That there's so many countries, and then some government really proposed this to establish the interconnectors among Asian countries. But if I see the results, like only Korea and Japan do not have interconnectors with other countries, but somehow some Asian countries have been connected with each other. So I think that the strengthening those interconnectors is quite useful to share the rich renewable energy sources in Asia. And especially when Japan tried to introduce the renewables, then that we can share that portion to Korea, and then especially we can enjoy the rich resource of Asia in Japan as well. And but actually, that if I see that Japan's situation, maybe that we have to integrate internally Japan first, and then that we could not then, but maybe at the same time that we can expand that interconnectors with other countries such as China and Korea. So then that we can do it at a simultaneous way to expand the renewables and then the grid flexibility at the same time.
Absolutely. So now I see quite a few questions coming through from digital media and also from the chat. So I'll dive into the questions from our audience. So Randy, we have one for you. The question is, so we are consuming most of our energy for transport and for heating and cooling, where the shares of renewable energy are relatively low. Could you please highlight or spotlight the main solutions that we can implement in those two sectors? So those sectors being transport and for heating and cooling.
Thank you so much for this question. Well, when we're talking about heating and cooling, one of the obvious, or two of the obvious answers is district heating/cooling and energy efficiency. So one of the main drivers of energy demand actually when we're talking about Southeast Asia is going to be the demand for space cooling, and implementing very, very simple energy efficiency measures and political targets will actually really help demand. And I think it's said a lot, but it cannot be said enough. The cheapest energy is the energy you do not consume. So definitely this is a really, really important measure. When we're then talking about transport, I think there's different types of transport to talk about and different solutions, because when we're talking about, you know, residential transport in small cars or two-wheelers, the obvious answer is electrification through EVs. But when we're talking about long-haul traffic or heavy vehicles or so on, electric vehicles might not be the answer. I'm not an expert here, but I see a lot of talk about obviously hydrogen. Then the question is, how do you scale up the production of this type of fuel, of renewable fuel? Can it be done fast enough? Can it be done at scale? I think there's really good strategies coming out of countries like Australia and Japan for hydrogen, for example. But we're still at very early stages and it's still really quite expensive. And I think, you know, the cost of the energy transition is something that obviously we need to talk about, because it's the obvious intervention that somebody who is not a keen supporter of renewables will make, is just saying like, this is too expensive. Yeah, but we need to talk about policies to drive costs down. We need to talk about strategic investments in order to drive these costs down. And we also need to make sure that we actually factor in all the costs that are a part of fossil fuels, like the externalities of effects on people's lives and so on. So that would be my short answer to transport and heating/cooling. Thanks.
Absolutely. And also bringing up hydrogen, we're seeing it on social media quite a lot. A lot of people are talking about hydrogen, especially looking at how we can decarbonize the transport sector. You can see a great slide behind me. It's a little bit outdated, but the transport sector is one of the ones that uses the least amount of renewable energy. So Natalie, I know that you looked at a lot of the numbers of the report. Did you have anything to add to what Randy was saying?
Yes, I can add something about transport in particular, because you were talking about electrifying part of the transport. Of course, there's also micromobility that needs to be developed, and this is not using energy basically. But in terms of electrification, Asia, it's booming with the 2- and 3-wheelers and electricity, and even EVs in general. So this is already a good sign. But as you said in the past, there's infrastructure, charging infrastructure. There still need to be deployed in a larger way. So well, things are moving not as we would like to, but yeah, there's hope. I hope there's hope. And for the heating and cooling, small mentioning, we had a figure in the report, and we were evaluating the G20 countries. I went through it just to be sure what I was saying, and we have some countries that have been including renewables in the heating and cooling, but of course not the majority. I would say, if I recall correctly, it's China that was there in the list, and there was perhaps, I'm not sure about Indonesia, but there's only 2 countries basically from the G20s from Asia that are including already renewables in the heating and cooling systems. And this is not the norm, of course, in Asia, but progress in progress. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I'll have a few more questions from the audience. And Neeraj, the next one is for you. So a key challenge over the past years in India has been around energy access, particularly in remote areas. Can you please tell us a little bit more about today's situation, about this, and how that fits in with the current needs of renewable energy deployment in the region?
Thanks for the question, and it's again very pertinent in Indian context, especially because we have a large population, and while we have achieved the last mile connectivity to most households, the universal access is still slightly away, where we are able to provide affordable and reliable power 24/7 to all the households and all the consumers. So that challenge remains, and as many of you would also be aware that India is going through one of the extreme heat wave over last couple of decades. So the power cuts are not just in the rural areas. Many of the urban centers are also facing these power cuts. Very brief, but the system and the infrastructure is at its maximum, and to sort of address some of these things, renewables can play a big role. Be it, let's say, if we talk about distributed renewables, they can help us provide access to, not just reliable and affordable electricity, but also clean electricity to these households. And there are studies which suggest that, to electrify these remotest areas, distributed renewables along with storage is still more economical way than extending the transmission lines and, trying to provide electricity from the central generating units. Similarly, even in the urban centers, we need to really look at distributed renewable energy solutions such as rooftop solar or micro wind turbines, as well as integrating storage. Many forward-looking utilities are recognizing these benefits. They recognize that rooftop solar with storage will help them save on the investment. It will also help them make grid more resilient against some of these challenges that the grid is facing. Having said that, the transition from or transition towards distributed renewable energies is much more challenging because of the lack of awareness, the right market solutions are not there, and even there is a disconnect in the policies and their on-ground implementations. So, cumulatively, all these issues are resulting into lower adoption of distributed renewable energies at a massive scale. Despite that, of course, India has dedicated programs where they are targeting agricultural consumption, and they are also, trying to replace agricultural and rural demand with distributed renewables. There are also programs where now we are looking at urban centers to completely move away from conventional power to renewables. And then many of the states are also coming up with supportive regulations which allow even people who do not have exclusive roof rights, or people who live in rented properties who do not even have a rooftop to put up these systems. So many of these things are taking place. However, because of the consumer-centric challenges and the market-centric challenges, it's very difficult to have that the kind of momentum we would want, and it will still take some time to have larger adoption of distributed renewables in India. Right now, distributed renewables are only about 7 to 8% of the total renewable energy installations. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing. And you really hit it home as well when you were talking about the heat wave, which I think is affecting quite a lot of people, not just in Asia, but also here in Paris. It's sweltering, which is very unusual for this time of year. So I think it really puts a spotlight on energy, and it really raises the conversation. Speaking of infrastructure, we've got a question here for you, Mika. So you mentioned the need for infrastructure transformation, and in particular electricity grids, to be able to adopt more renewables. Could you elaborate on best practices in your region, in your area, that might show the way? Or maybe what is needed to start this transformation?
Yeah, actually, that the one thing is we need a kind of a more smooth and a flexible way of management of the existing grid. Because in Japan, for example, that we are divided into 9 parts, grid management system and a power market. So maybe that we have to integrate those 9 markets into the one area to have the smooth management, flexible management of the grid, to have the renewables that we can utilize. Like for example, renewable, of course, that we don't have any kind of renewables are really decentralized, that are not like fossil fuels or uranium, but still there is a area that are really suitable for wind. There is an area really suitable for PV solar. So that because Japan is really long country, so we can share those kind of a potential area renewables really equally in Japan, that with the current grid flexible management. But to accelerate the bus renewables to reach 100% of renewable status by 2050, or maybe that 2035, then that we have to have the stronger grid system, and then that to transport the electricity from, for example, Hokkaido offshore wind to demand center, the Tokyo and the Kansai area. That is also needed. And then of course that if we can share with those renewables with other countries, it's more, we can get flexibility in that area. So the interconnectors are also very important for the East Asian countries, that I believe. And then may I add one comment that what Randy said, that about the hydrogen thing, because that in Japan that so many people are talking about hydrogen, especially for the kind of a transport use. But I think that the hydrogen or the ammonia could play an important role in the certain area in coming decades, such as the heavy industry, decarbonization. In that way, but I think that we have to have the common terminology. What the hydrogen is? Hydrogen is not the first energy source, not the primary energy source. That we have to make something, as we have to make hydrogen from something, and then hydrogen has to be a green hydrogen, and then it has to be brought by renewables. So we have to use such kind of the same terminology in the region, and make sure that we have the green hydrogen to be utilized in the region. That is my comment.
I'm just going to jump perhaps in and share with you what we have done about green hydrogen. We call it renewable hydrogen at REN21, but it's exactly the same. It's hydrogen produced through renewables. So we have seen a lot of push for this hydrogen and this decarbonization. And we have also seen, and there's a figure that we made this year, and which are the policies, the countries that have included policies pushing for renewables, for hydrogen with renewables. And we have a mixed picture. It's very early stage for sure. And some other countries we have seen also positioning themselves, as Randy mentioned, as exporters of hydrogen. So there's a shift in the way of functioning today, and hopefully this will be a solution to decarbonize other very heavy fossil fuel dependent sectors like the industry and so on, and perhaps also help on balancing, because electrolyzers will have a balancing effect in these grids as well if they are included. So there's a lot of options to facilitate this connection and flows of energy within allowing high penetration of grid. But then we have to, I think that as Randy said that very, very clearly at the beginning, the operators need to have the options and the choice to go ahead and move the needle and stop operating as we had done in the past to ensure 100% reliability of the grid, because this is the risk of having perhaps these glitches in the middle. I don't know. I'm not sure if this is a word in English, but yeah, those little glitches in the in the operation.
But if I can just come in with one quick comment on hydrogen, I love that it's gaining so much traction because it's the only way to kind of scale up and so on. One word of caution though, I have seen some national energy plans kind of use hydrogen as an excuse to keep operating their thermal plants, because then they can just say, oh yeah, we're operating our thermal plants, and then some magic year, boom, we switch all our power generations to hydrogen. That's just not realistic, because hydrogen, because of the efficiency loss from renewables to hydrogen to back to power, hydrogen will never be a baseload fuel, or that might be a very kind of controversial statement I'm making here, but I'm just saying there's going to be other fuels that are more cost effective to run, you know, the bulk of the power generation. So I want to make sure to say that we must push governments not to let hydrogen and the talk about hydrogen and what hydrogen could be in 2050 be, you know, what you say in English, like a resting place where you can just relax, and then at some point the energy transitions will happen, because I don't believe that's the case.
Thank you for adding in there as well. Niraj, since we've all had a turn talking about hydrogen, was there anything that you wanted to add on the topic?
It's not my domain area, but building on what Randy mentioned, of course we'll have to have clear priorities. India, if we are talking about, let's say, 500 gigawatt mission, we are talking about decarbonizing the electricity generation. But when we are talking about hydrogen, it's about decarbonizing the hard to abate industrial sectors and replacing the fuels, right? But then green hydrogen, they both use renewable energies for its manufacturing. So then India is already, will be struggling to find the suitable land to build more and more renewables. And both these, the ambitions will be conflicting with each others, where we have the same land parcel, same generation capacity, but competitive usage. So we'll also have to, when we are formulating these plans for green hydrogen or the energy transition plans in the electricity sector, of course we'll have to either keep those two separate and have additional renewable capacity instead of using the the same renewable capacity and communicating that the same gigawatt will help have energy transition in the electricity and the industrial sector. I think that's not going to happen. We'll have to have two clear different pathways to target.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So I've got a question here from Aishwarya, a question for everyone actually. Will it ever be possible for the world to agree on capping energy consumption and setting conservative limits on energy demand growth based on population or income or development levels. So I can see Mika being a little bit questioning of that question, so perhaps I'll go to you. What were your thoughts? Do you think it, in terms of energy demand, it's possible?
I think that it's very difficult to put like a kind of a based on population, income, development levels, but somehow, if I see the current situation, you know, after the Russia's military invasion, it looks like that they put the kind of a global carbon tax, now on us. Like it's a very high fossil fuel prices, and then and then I don't think that this effect will end shortly. So I think that this trend continues, and then renewables, you know, and contradictory that the cost is really decreasing. So somehow that this situation to put the cap of the energy consumption and setting the conservative limits on energy demand. So I think that we have to use this opportunity to more accelerate renewables.
I can see you nodding as well, Randy. What were your thoughts on the question?
Yeah, so my approach to the question is a little bit kind of more lofty, so to speak. My problem is with this question is that there's a lot of countries that equate economic prosperity with energy use. So we see a lot of countries that have clear targets of increasing their energy use simply because they equate this with economic growth. And this is a link we have to break. We simply have to say that you can be a more prosperous country. You can break out of lower income status or whatever without exponentially increasing your energy demand and without having necessarily an energy demand that looks like Europe or the US, who went through a very different industrialization. Then potentially if you leapfrog, that can happen. But again, that really requires some serious investments into leapfrogging with energy efficiency measures and so on. And it also really seriously requires some breaking of traditional thinking from the policymakers' perspective, from the politicians. And also what measures do we use to measure GDP? For example, if energy production is part of your GDP and you want to see your GDP grow because that means your population is getting richer, but your system is inherently based on fossil fuels, well, why would you want to cap energy demand? Because then, why? Because then your GDP is going down and you're a bad leader and you're getting voted out of office. So there's really a much kind of more philosophy type discussion in my mind to be had here. That needs to link those two things. Otherwise, I don't see a world where we can agree to cap energy consumption.
Fantastic, thank you for that. And I'll ask the same question as well to you, Niraj. Did you have anything to add around capping energy consumption?
First of all, very novel thoughts in that question. And Mika and Randy has already, they have covered the response quite well there. I just would want to bring in, again, on the philosophical point, people in the equation. We are aware that the climate change is real, and the people who are vulnerable are in some of these poorer countries and in the, economically less developed regions. So by capping the the energy consumption and the growth prospects, are we depriving further these consumers and opening up them to the harsh the realities that we will witness going forward because of the climate change? So again, there's no a clear answer to this, and it's more of a philosophical discussion that we could have. And of course, if we have a system, something like this, that will solve all the problems that we are facing. Yeah. So that's a quick submission from my side.
Thank you so much. And perhaps a quick answer from you as well, Natalie, if you wanted to add to your thoughts.
Yeah, Well, I'm coming last, so everything has been already said. Somehow, I think that the more developed economies might also need to work on energy efficiency in a harder, in a speedier way, in a harder way, to reduce energy consumption and don't allow this to go further. On the other side, we have to accompany as well. This is where the investment comes from. We have to accompany the economies that would like to develop to do it in the more decarbonized way, if I could say it like this. Perhaps it's not the correct term, but it's a balance. We have to reduce consumption in some places, and others will still need to increase. But let's do it in a thoughtful way. So this will be my conclusion, just to add on. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So before we end this event, I would like to give the floor one final time to each of our panelists just to give their final thoughts. And if there wasn't a question that was asked today, perhaps this is an opportunity to add any answers that they would like to share today. So I'll hand the floor over to Randy, if you would like to give us your final thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience and our online audience as well.
Thank you so much. I think this conversation has been really, really interesting, and it just shows how important renewables are, and the work we're doing really is. I want to say one thing again, because I really think that this has to be a discussion about, you know, economies and making sure they're sustainable going forward. And if you're looking from the perspective of the region that I'm in, and I'm sitting in Bangkok right now, I hear a lot of talk about the European CBAM, so the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, which it's an amazing initiative that, you know, will adjust for whatever, so that you don't kind of hurt the environment by just producing elsewhere where things are cheaper and less sustainable. But also, it's a real worry where I'm sitting, because, you know, the power systems and energy systems of Southeast Asia are not yet sustainable. So if this is implemented without really following up with some clear assistance to make them more green, I think it can create a lot of trouble. And we are seeing, you know, a lot of economies in this area of the world being in trouble because they have suffered from the pandemic. Now they're suffering from higher costs and general inflation. And we really need to balance this, because otherwise I'm afraid that we will lose sight of the renewables transition that really needs to happen, and we cannot lose sight. So it's just basically a plea and a call to think holistically when we're talking about economies and renewables deployment. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'll hand the floor over to Niraj.
Thanks, Jessica. Final thoughts. While we are talking about you know, accelerated energy transition, which has led to a lot of focus towards large-scale renewables, but we are completely missing on the distributed renewables and the role they will play, either in terms of, you know, making grid more resilient, making people more resilient against the adversities of climate change. India, if we talk about you know, people in India, we have a long coastline, and the cyclonic intensities are increasing. Many of these areas are going out of power. The electricity utilities are struggling to upgrade their distribution networks. So we really need to also bring distributed renewables into the equation more prominently, rather than you know, having entire focus towards large-scale renewables, which again will have a lot of you know, adversities in terms of the system operations or the you know, ability of countries to provide affordable electricity to its industry and people. So we need to look at more optimized way towards energy transition, and also bring in distributed renewables in the discussions and the ambitions that we build for countries and for the globe as a whole. Yeah. So, but thank you once again. Really nice discussion and very unique thoughts and inputs that came out. Really enjoyed it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So I'll hand the floor over to Mika. Anything to add in your final thoughts?
Yeah, at the beginning of my talk that I said that Asia's direction is overall that kind of a good direction that we are keeping on the track. But at the same time that I felt like that Asia is a little bit lack of urgency, because that I see that so many countries, especially European countries, and then even the US, that North American countries that changed their energy policy dramatically in past 2 months. And then they set the new target of renewables, that they declared acceleration of renewables, that have the kind of the procedure to install renewables. But I haven't heard that Asia has such kind of challenge towards renewables. And then that we are facing the kind of a double price over energy, and then the 4 times that the higher price of coal in Japan, and then that, but still the government is just paying the subsidies for fossil fuels, but not have the new aggressive target for renewables. I think that the Asia has to face that's a kind of energy crisis ongoing, and then that is a challenge for our future, not only for decarbonization, but for our society and then for our economy. So I hope that the Asian leaders have such kind of urgency to revise the renewable energy target and then accelerate the energy transition in Asia. Then thank you very much, Dr. Jessica and LEN21 for this opportunity.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mika. So I'll hand the floor over to Natalie for your final thoughts.
Yes, well, as Mika just said, and this is something that we track in the report quite fairly easily, is that in terms of power, Asia is doing a super good job, and it's among the top most. There's a lot of countries among the top 10 countries installing capacity, and this is a good way. What we have, I'm just trying to link it to what we do at the GSR, and this is where it's hard to measure. For example, what Neera says about DREA and the access on energy access, how to track this. And this is, there are some topics that are so hard to track. For example, the energy access. It's for us, it's a very hard challenge. We have a lot of partners that collect that information, but this is a super challenging topic to continue tracking on a quick basis. Investment, it's the same. We struggle to identify exactly what is happening in a quick pace and in details. We have a nice picture of what happens outside India and China, but then if we're gonna go granularity country by country, this is a huge challenge. So I think the transition part of what it's hard to make things move forward, it's because we don't know where are we standing right now all the time. We are not sure exactly where are we standing. We have a rough idea, perhaps with a year delay or two, and this doesn't help policymakers at the end to move things forward at the pace we need. So this will be my small conclusion from the GSR and how to work with the data and how hard it is to find what is happening right now in specific topics. As I said, access, energy access, or even investment. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you so much. I think you really touched on how much of a feat it is to really produce the Renewables 2020 Global Status Report. It's really quite comprehensive, and it's touching on all the topics that you just mentioned, which are very difficult to track. So a shout out to over 600 people who really brought that together this week. It's been a great effort. And so I really encourage everyone, if you haven't read it yet, it's a fantastic bedtime reading. So I'd like to end with a big thanks to our panelists today, Randy Christensen, Neeraj Kaldeep, and also Mika Obashai. Thank you so much to your thoughtful additions to the conversation. It's been a fantastic conversation to be part of. And also I want to give a warm thank you, to the ADB who are hosting the Asia Clean Energy Forum. So thank you, everyone. And a recording of this will be available to online and to all of our guests. Have a lovely afternoon, morning, or evening where you are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.